You are about to hear two Christmas stories people share anonymously. They claim they're real, but they also admit they never really tell them aloud. They don't sound like horror, that's what makes them worse. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's start with the first one.
Every family has a tradition they can't explain. Something that started so long ago that nobody remembers who came up with it, but everyone keeps doing it anyway, because stopping would feel wrong, like you'd be tempting fate. In my family, that tradition was simple. Every Christmas, we set an extra plate at the table. Not for a late arrival, not just in case, not for the neighbor who sometimes stopped by. An actual place setting. A chair pulled out, a full plate, a glass, silverware, napkin folded like it mattered. And the strangest part was, nobody could ever tell me why. I didn't notice it as a little kid. When you're 7, you don't question anything. If grown-ups do something, you assume it's normal. You assume the whole world sets an extra plate on Christmas. But when I got older, maybe 13 or 14, I started paying attention. I remember it clearly because it was the first time I asked. We were all in the dining room. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted meat. The tree lights flickered softly in the living room, and the heater rattled in a way that made the whole place feel warmer than it probably was. My mom was setting the plates, counting quietly under her breath. 1, 2, 3. Then she paused, opened the drawer again, and pulled out another fork. I watched her set a plate at the far end of the table, right under the framed photo of my grandparents. "Mom," I said, "who's that for?" She didn't look up. "Huh?" "The extra plate." She glanced at it like she had only just noticed it herself, like it had appeared while she wasn't watching. "Oh," she said with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's just what we do." That was her answer. That's all anyone ever gave me. It's tradition. We always have. It's just Christmas. I asked my dad later, when he was in the kitchen carving the meat. He didn't laugh. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't treat it like a silly question. He got quiet. Then he said, "Don't worry about it." And the way he said it made my stomach tighten, like I'd walked into a room where people had been arguing and suddenly stopped. That was the first time I realized the extra plate wasn't just a quirky habit. It was something my parents didn't want to talk about. The years went by, and the tradition stayed. No matter where we celebrated, our house, my aunt's house, my grandparents' old place before it was sold, there was always an extra setting. The adults treated it like it was normal, but none of them ever explained why. By the time I was in college, it became background noise, like the tree, the music, the wrapping paper, just one more part of the holiday. Until the year I noticed something I couldn't ignore. It was Christmas Eve. I'd driven home late, exhausted from finals, and the roads were empty in that eerie way they get on holidays. My mom had kept the light on for me, and the house was quiet except for the soft sound of the dishwasher running. I dropped my bags by the stairs and walked into the kitchen. That's when I saw it. The table was set already, even though it was barely past midnight. My mom must have done it earlier and left it for the morning. And at the far end of the table, like always, was the extra place setting. But this time, there was something on the plate. A small wrapped gift. Neat brown paper, a simple ribbon, no tag. No name, just sitting there, like it belonged. I stood there for a full minute, staring at it, waiting for my brain to supply some normal explanation. Maybe my mom had put it there for decoration. Maybe it was for someone coming tomorrow. Maybe it was for me, and she'd forgotten to label it. But the longer I stared, the more it felt wrong. Because the paper was perfectly folded, the ribbon was tight. It looked intentional, like someone had placed it with care. And I knew my mom. She was tired, stressed, the kind of person who forgot where she put her phone while she was holding it. She didn't wrap gifts like that. I walked closer and leaned in, like the gift might move if I got too close. I didn't touch it. I just stared. Then, I heard a sound behind me. A chair sliding. Very softly. I turned so fast my shoulder hit the door frame. Nothing was there. The dining room was empty. I stood completely still, listening. The house made normal night noises, pipes, heater, the faint tick of the clock on the wall, but there was also something else. A whisper of fabric, like someone shifting weight in a chair. I should have turned on the lights. I should have called out. Instead, I walked backwards into the kitchen, keeping my eyes on the table, and I went upstairs like I was trying not to disturb anything. I told myself it was my imagination. I told myself I was exhausted. I told myself the gift would make sense in the morning. Christmas morning came bright and cold. My little cousins were already there, tearing into presents in the living room. The house was loud, cheerful, chaotic. I tried to act normal. I tried to pretend I wasn't thinking about the extra place setting, but I kept glancing towards the dining room, and the gift was still there. At some point, when everyone was distracted, I pulled my mom aside. "Hey," I said quietly, "did you put a gift at the extra plate?" She blinked at me. "What gift?" My stomach dropped. "The one on the extra place setting." My mom frowned and started walking towards the dining room like she expected to prove me wrong, like she expected the plate to be empty. When she saw it, her face did something strange. Not fear, not surprise, recognition. Like she'd seen it before. She didn't touch it. She didn't pick it up. She just stared, lips slightly parted, and whispered, "Oh no." That was the first time I'd ever heard my mother sound feared on Christmas. I said her name, but she didn't respond. My dad came in then holding a tray of drinks. He followed our line of sight and stopped. The tray tilted slightly in his hands. "What is that?" he asked. My mom swallowed hard. It's here." My dad set the tray down slowly, carefully, like loud noises were dangerous. Then he said, very quietly, "Did you set it?" My mom shook her head. "I didn't." My dad's eyes moved to me, and in that moment, I realized something worse than the gift itself. It wasn't just that my parents didn't know who placed it. It was that they did know what it meant, and they didn't want me to know. My dad reached for the gift. My mom grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she hissed. He pulled his hand back like he'd been burned. My aunt called from the living room, asking where the plates were for breakfast. My cousins were laughing. The TV was playing a holiday movie. Everything felt normal, except our corner of the house, where the air had turned heavy. My mom took a shaky breath. "We don't open it," she said. I stared at her. "Why?" My dad looked like he was choosing his words with a kind of carefulness that terrified me. "Because it's not for us," he said. I waited. Neither of them continued. That's the kind of silence that makes your thoughts loud. Suddenly, every weird memory becomes sharp. Every Christmas where I caught an adult staring too long at the empty chair. Every time my mom's smile looked forced. Every time someone asked if we could just skip the extra plate this year, and my grandma snapped absolutely not. All those moments clicked into place like a puzzle you didn't realize you were building. My dad leaned closer. "Listen," he said. "I know you're curious, but just let it be, please." I didn't agree. I nodded because there were kids in the other room and I didn't want to make a scene. But that gift sat at the end of the table all day and I couldn't stop thinking about it. By evening, everyone had gone home. The house quieted down again. Plates were stacked in the sink. Wrapping paper filled trash bags by the door. The extra plate was still set. The gift was still there. My parents went to bed early, exhausted. I stayed up under the excuse of watching a movie, but really, I was waiting. I don't know what I expected. A noise? A shadow? Someone breaking in? Instead,
The house just got quieter. At around 2 a.m., I turned off the TV and sat in the dark, letting my eyes adjust. The tree lights were the only illumination, throwing faint colors across the living room. I watched the doorway to the dining room. Minutes passed. Then, very softly, I heard it. The scrape of a chair. Not loud, not dramatic, like someone being careful. I froze. The sound came again, slow, controlled. I held my breath and leaned forward. In the dim light, I saw movement. A figure, sitting at the end of the table, in the chair we always set out. They weren't glowing. They weren't a monster. They weren't some shadow creature. They looked normal. That was what made it worse. A person in a dark coat, short hair, hands folded on the table. Their face was half hidden by the angle, but I could see enough to know that they were real. They didn't move.
They didn't look around. They just sat there, like they belonged. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. I wanted to call out. I wanted to run upstairs and wake my parents, but I couldn't, because in that moment, I realized something that made my skin go cold. I recognized them. Not clearly, not like recognizing a friend, more like recognizing a song you haven't heard in years, a face you've seen in a photo you can't place. The person lifted their head slightly. Their eyes found mine in the dark, and they smiled. Not an evil grin, a gentle smile, sad, familiar. Then they reached forward and placed their hand on the gift. My body moved before my brain caught up. I stood up, stepping into the doorway. The floor creaked. The person's eyes never left mine. I swallowed hard and forced words out. "Who are you?" The person didn't answer. They just slid the gift toward themselves, slowly, like it had always been theirs. I took another step into the dining room. The air felt colder in there, like the house had a draft. "Stop," I said. Still no answer. The person picked up the gift, and then, very carefully, they stood. They moved toward the back door, the same back door my family always checked twice before bed on Christmas Eve. I followed them, not fast, not brave, more like I was trapped inside a nightmare where my legs belonged to someone else. They reached the back door, paused, and looked back at me. Their expression changed just slightly, like they were deciding something. Then they whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Next year you'll understand." And they opened the door. Cold air rushed in. Snowflakes blew into the kitchen like ash. The person stepped out into the night. I rushed forward, slamming the door open, expecting to see them on the porch, on the steps, in the yard. But there was nothing. No footprints. No movement. Just smooth, untouched snow. It was like the world had erased them the moment they crossed the threshold. I stood there shaking, staring into the darkness, my breath fogging up the air. Then I turned back. The extra plate was still there, but the gift was gone. The chair was tucked in neatly, like no one had ever sat in it. And my reflection in the dark window looked wrong. Not physically, just unfamiliar, like I was seeing myself from a distance. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I confronted my parents. I told them everything, the gift, the figure, the back door. My mom's face went pale. My dad sat down like his legs gave out. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then my dad said, "You saw him." "Him?" I asked. My mom covered her mouth with her hand. My dad nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the table. "He always comes," he said, "but you're not supposed to see him." "Who is he?" I demanded. My mom's voice came out thin.
we don't say his name. That's not an answer. My dad looked up at me. His eyes were wet. He's family, he said. That hit me so hard I almost laughed because it sounded insane. That's impossible. My mom stood and walked to a cabinet above the refrigerator. She reached up, pulling down a dusty box I'd never seen before. She set it on the table with shaking hands. Inside were old photographs, faded, curled at the edges. Pictures of Christmases from decades ago. Trees, fireplaces, smiling faces. And in every photo, always at the edge, always slightly blurred, was the same person, sitting at the end of the table, the extra plate, the extra chair, the guest. My mom pulled out one photo and held it up. "Do you recognize him?" she asked. I stared. In the photo, he looked younger, different haircut, but the face was the same. That half-familiar, impossible-to-place face. Then my mom flipped the photo over. There was handwriting on the back, a date, a name, and underneath it, a message. He left, but he comes back at Christmas. My throat tightened. "Who is he?" I whispered again. My dad answered this time. "He was your uncle." I blinked. I didn't have an uncle. At least, I didn't think I did. My mom's voice trembled. "You did," she said, "before you were born." They told me the story in pieces, like it hurt to say out loud. My uncle, my mom's brother, had been the golden child, the favorite, the one who was supposed to do big things. Until one Christmas, he disappeared. Not kidnapped, not murdered. He simply left, walked out the back door during a family argument, and never came back. No calls, no letters, no body. My grandparents kept his place at the table that year, convinced he'd walk back in. And when he didn't, they kept it the next year too. It was supposed to be for one Christmas. Then it became a promise. A promise that he still belonged. A promise that he wasn't erased. A promise that even if he left, he had a place. And over the years, my family stopped telling the story, stopped saying his name, because it was easier to pretend he never existed than admit they were still waiting. But the tradition stayed. And then my mom said something that made the room feel smaller. "He started coming back," she whispered. I stared at her. "Not physically," she said, struggling with the words. "But you saw him too," I said. My mom's eyes filled with tears. "1 year," she admitted. "When I was your age. I stayed up. I saw him take the plate and leave. I told my parents. They made me promise not to speak about it." My dad nodded slowly. "The rule was always the same," he said. "We set the plate. We don't look. We don't follow. We don't open anything he leaves." I felt sick. But why does he come back? My mom looked at me like she wanted to tell me the truth and couldn't. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "Because the only place he still exists is here." I didn't understand. Not fully. Not yet. My dad slid one of the photos toward me. "Look at the dates," he said. I did. The photos spanned decades, but there were gaps. Years missing. Years where there were no Christmas photos at all. "Those were the years we tried to stop," my dad said quietly. I looked up. "Stop what?" My dad swallowed. "Stop setting the plate." My stomach dropped. My mom's hand gripped the edge of the table. Every time we didn't set it, something changed. "Changed how?" I asked, already afraid of the answer. My mom's eyes met mine. It wasn't him who disappeared, she whispered. It was us. Silence. My brain tried to reject it. My dad spoke carefully, like he was afraid the words could become real again. We didn't set the plate one year. And afterwards, your grandmother couldn't remember her own brother. At all. It was like he never existed. My throat dried. Then another year we tried again, my mom said, and a cousin just stopped being part of the family. Not dead, not missing, just no one remembered him. No photos, no stories. Nothing. I stared at the table, at the extra chair, at the space where the gift had been. My pulse thubbed in my ears. You're telling me forgetting the plate makes people disappear? My mom nodded slowly.
But keeping it, I said, voice shaking, means he comes back? My dad's eyes were haunted. Yes. And then he looked at me and said the words I will never forget. And this year, you saw him, so next year, you might be the one at the end of the table. I laughed once, sharp and humorless, because my body didn't know what else to do. That's insane! My mom reached for my hand. Sweetheart, she whispered, look at your phone. I frowned, confused, and pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened my camera roll, scrolled to last night, to the photos I took earlier in the evening, the tree, my cousins, the gifts. And then I saw it. A photo of the dining room from Christmas morning, everyone smiling at the table, plates laid out, and at the far end, under my grandparents' picture, the extra chair wasn't empty. Someone was sitting there, slightly blurred, dark coat, sad mile, looking straight at the camera, and in the reflection of the dining room window behind him, I saw myself, standing in the doorway, watching. But in that reflection, my face wasn't mine. For a split second, the shape of it looked like his, like I was already becoming part of the tradition. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. My mother's voice shook as she spoke. That's why we don't look, she whispered. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, I understood why no one in my family ever explained the extra plate. Because the plate wasn't for a guest. It was for whoever the family was slowly losing. A place setting to keep you from being erased. A seat at the table to prove you were real. And the most bizarre part of all, if you asked any of them to explain it out loud, they couldn't. Because maybe the tradition wasn't just something they did. Maybe it was something the house demanded. Maybe Christmas wasn't the holiday where he returned. Maybe it was the only night the family was allowed to remember. And now that I had seen him, I couldn't stop wondering the worst question of all. Next Christmas, when we set the extra plate, who will it be for?
If you're still listening, you might want to stay. Stories like this don't come around often. The second one is even stranger.
Every year, my family received a Christmas card from someone we didn't know. No return address, no full name, just a simple message written inside. Wishing your family a peaceful holiday season. That was it. No glitter, no long note, no photos. Just a plain card, postmarked from our city. At first, it didn't seem strange. People send Christmas cards all the time. Maybe it was a distant relative. Maybe an old friend my parents forgot to mention. But year after year, the cards kept coming. Always the same style, always the same handwriting, always arriving a few days before Christmas. And slowly, the messages started changing. The first few years were harmless. Hope the new year brings good health. Wishing you strength in the coming months. Generic, forgettable. But the year I turned 15, the card said something different. Wishing you a smooth recovery in the spring. I remember my mom reading it out loud in the kitchen, smiling politely. "That's nice," she said, very thoughtful. My dad shrugged it off. Weird, but nice. At the time, none of us questioned it. Until April. That was when my mom slipped on the stairs at work and tore a ligament in her knee. Surgery, physical therapy, months of recovery. The moment it happened, I thought of the card. Not in a panicked way, more like a passing chill. A coincidence. That's what we told ourselves. The next Christmas, another card arrived. Same handwriting, same plain design. This time, the message read, "Some changes are hard, but necessary. You'll understand soon." My parents exchanged a glance when they read it. "What changes?" I asked. My dad laughed it off. "Who knows? Sounds like fortune cookie nonsense." But that year wasn't normal. My older sister moved out unexpectedly. No argument, no dramatic fight. She just packed her things one weekend and left. Said she needed space. Said she'd call. She didn't. The house felt quieter after that. Emptier. By the following Christmas, even my parents were uneasy. When the card arrived, my mom didn't open it right away. She set it on the counter and stared at it like it might bite. "Should we?" she asked. My dad hesitated, then opened it. Inside, the message was shorter. "Some loss is rarely loud." No signature. No explanation. That was the year my grandfather died. Suddenly. Heart attack. No warning. At the funeral, I watched my mom cry in a way I never had before. Quiet. Controlled. Like she was afraid of letting too much out. That night I went back to my room and pulled the old cards out of my drawer. I'd started keeping them without really knowing why. I laid them out on my bed, side by side. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. The handwriting hadn't changed, not even slightly. Same pressure, same curves, same slant, even though the cards spanned nearly 10 years. I took one to my mom. "Do you recognize this handwriting?" I asked. She studied it for a moment, then shook her head. "No." But she looked unsettled. The next year, the card came earlier than usual, December 10th. My mom didn't open it. She didn't even touch it. My dad did, his face tightening as he read. "What does it say?" I asked. He hesitated, then handed it to me. "Some truths don't stay buried forever." That was it. 2 weeks later, my sister showed up at our door, unannounced, pale, thin. She didn't hug us, didn't smile. She just stood there, shaking. She told us she'd been in an abusive relationship, that she'd been too ashamed to tell anyone, that she thought she could handle it alone. She stayed with us for months. That card sat in my head the entire time. By then, I wasn't calling them coincidences anymore. I started keeping a journal. Dates, messages, what happened afterward. Patterns emerged. The cards never named events directly. They hinted, suggested, prepared, like someone was softening the blow before it landed. The thought that scared me the most wasn't that the cards predicted the future. It was that someone knew us well enough to guess it. By the time I moved out for college, I was obsessed. I started researching. Old addresses, public records, former tenants of our house. That's when I found his name. A man who lived in our house before us. He'd been a data analyst, specialized in behavioral modeling. He died alone. No family, no known friends. And then I found something worse. A forum post. Archived, forgotten,
written under a username I didn't recognize, but the writing style felt familiar. The post talked about predictive life patterns, how people thought the future was chaotic, but most lives followed statistical paths. Health, relationships, loss, not exact events, probabilities. People think knowing the future is magic. It's not. It's math. I scrolled. My heart started pounding. Another post. I don't predict disasters. I predict likelihoods. The mistake people make is thinking that means choice. Then I found the last post he ever made. If I'm right, the only thing left to test is how people react when warned. I sat back, dizzy. The cards weren't prophecies, they were probabilities. Someone had studied lives like ours, patterns like ours, and he'd been right. But there was one more card I hadn't opened yet, the one that arrived this year. It was still sitting on my kitchen table. I hadn't told my parents. I hadn't told anyone. I stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. The message inside was different, shorter, colder. This was always the most likely outcome. That night, my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice was shaking. "Your father collapsed. They're taking him to the hospital." He survived, barely. But everything changed after that. I stopped receiving cards. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. Sometimes late at night, I think about what scares me more. The idea that someone knew what would happen, or the idea that statistically speaking, nothing that happened was rare at all. Because if the cards were right, then some outcomes aren't fate. They're just expected. And every Christmas now, I wonder, was the warning meant to comfort us, or was it meant to prove that knowing doesn't change anything at all?